All rise.
The Kosovo Specialist Chambers is now in session.
Good morning. Madam Court Officer, can you please call the case?
Good morning, Your Honors. This is file number KSC BC 2020-05, the Specialist Prosecutor versus Salih Mustafa.
Thank you, Mr. Court Officer. First of all, I will call appearances. Mr. Prosecutor.
Good morning, Your Honor. Good morning, everyone, members of the panel. The prosecution is represented today by Silvia Dascoli, Associate Prosecutor of the SPO, Julie Mann, Case Manager, Ari Abilota, our intern of the SPO. We might also have at some point the Deputy Specialist Prosecutor, Alex Whiting, present. He might join also. And my name is Cezary Michalczuk, SPO Prosecutor.
Thank you, Mr. Prosecutor. Victims' Counsel, you have the floor.
Good morning, Your Honors. Good morning, everyone. Today, the victims team is represented by Dr. Annie Pouz and myself, Marie-Pierre Barbeau, as co-counsel. Thank you.
Thank you. Defense Counsel, you have the floor.
Good morning, Your Honor. The defense is represented by myself, Julius van Bonnet, my co-counsel, Mr. Betim Shala, investigator, Mr. Fatmir Pillai, and in the courtroom today is joining us Mr. Mustafa.
Thank you, Defense Counsel. And for the record, you are appearing today in front of Trial Panel 1. As you can see, the presiding judge of the panel is present at today's hearing via a remote connection. And pursuant to Rule 19 of the rules, assigned judges shall be present at each stage of the proceedings throughout their deliberations. And due to the COVID-19 rules, I, as presiding judge, cannot be physically present. However, I can be present via video link in this courtroom. This has also been communicated to the President of the Kosovo Specialist Chambers, and I will be on transient chat with the panel to communicate and express my views to the panels at all times. And we will be performing this session in an open court hearing. We have planned today to hear the testimony of SPO witness 4849, Mr. Fatmir Humoli. And the panel has planned to do the following, that we will do only the examination by the SPO today, the examination in chief, I mean, insofar as it can be done in public. Mr. Prosecutor, I have a question for you. Do you intend to go in private session in your examination in chief? You have the floor.
Your Honor, we plan to elicit the entirety of the testimony of the witness in the open session, in the public session.
Thank you, Mr. Prosecutor. Then for today, we will try to finish the examination in chief. Victims' Counsel, can you already foresee if you would like to have questions in private session?
No, if we have questions, it's going to be in open session.
Thank you, Victims' Counsel. Defense Counsel, could you foresee what type of questions you will be asking?
For sure, we will have questions that will require private session, Your Honor.
Thank you, Defense Counsel. That means that today we will do the examination in chief and questions by the Victims' Counsel. And we will have a further hearing, not being today, for the cross-examination for the defense and the further eventual direct, the further examination. Let us see about the scheduling. I have been informed that the 11th, 14th, 15th, and 16th of February, the parties and the Victims' Council are available for further hearings. Is that correct? And I start with you, Mr. Prosecutor.
It is indeed correct, Your Honor. We are available at all times.
Thank you, Mr. Prosecutor. Victims' Council, would your team, would the team of the victims also be available on those dates?
Your Honor, we are working on this and we will make possible what we can, any of those dates. Okay, so that's
you.
still work in progress, but with some reliability we can assure presence. Thank you.
Thank you for your flexibility. Defense Counsel, and for you, would you be available on those dates?
Excuse me, Your Honor, we have a preference for the 11th, 16th, and 17th of February, and if that would be absolutely impossible, then the 14th and 15th.
Thank you, Defense Counsel, noted. The deadlines given in our second conduct of proceedings will be changed accordingly, of course. Later today, I will give an oral order, or we will issue a written decision later this week on the further planning of this examination of the witness and the further procedural steps we had envisaged to take, and the deadlines which go with them. Okay, let me see. Yes, are there any questions at this moment of time before I have the witness usher in, Mr. Prosecutor?
Your Honor, no questions really, but in scheduling the sessions, we'll be very happy if whatever dates we choose, they will be the most convenient dates for the witness, because obviously he'll have to travel. He's a member of Kosovo Parliament, so we cannot take his matters also in Kosovo lightly, and we should take them into consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Prosecutor, for reminding us of that. Victims' Counsel?
No, we have no further observation at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Defense Counsel?
Yes, Your Honor, we would like to make at least the court aware of the following. The witness that is currently being put as a prosecution witness has been in April last year already given by the defense as a defense witness. And we first of all dislike the behavior of the prosecution to just take away any kind of witness of the defense, and we really dislike this type of manner being treated. It's not a good manner to do so, and we have not given any consent for that as well. Therefore, we really want to know, as we have already some deadlines coming up, what will be the consequence for this for any future engagements, because we foresee that there's a possibility that this might happen again, and we just want to know what is the viewpoint of the panel regarding this issue. Once again, the defense has interviewed Mr. Humoli early March or late March, I believe it was, in 2021. We have given a notice at the time regarding the type of alibi defenses, and there is always an issue regarding who starts with what and how to do that. And we think that in this perspective, it is not a good way of the prosecution by kind of taking away, hijacking, or getting a witness from the defense and just put them on the list of the prosecution. So we just want to make the court aware of this. Mr. Humoli remains on our list as a defense witness at this moment. Obviously, we will have at some point have a defense preparation hearing or whatever, and we just want to have an idea what this would, what the consequence of all this would be as a result of the fact of the prosecution regarding this matter. Thank you very much. That is what we wanted to address the court to.
Mr. Prosecutor, I see that you're already standing, but I would like to ask the defense counsel some clarifying questions. So you will get the floor to react, but let me please ask some questions to the defense counsel. Thank you. Defense counsel, you are asking the views of the panel, but could you tell me exactly, you have made us aware of the fact that the prosecution has called to testify the same witness as you had already presented as one of your one of the witnesses for the defense. But what do you mean with your question? What are the consequences for future engagements? That's not clear for me.
This case, of course, does not stand by itself, and it is highly unusual that the prosecutor takes away kind of a witness of the defense, and we were just wondering what would be the consequence of that particular fact. And we do not believe that it is a correct manner that the prosecution is engaging in this way. So we just wanted to make sure that first of all the court is aware of this issue, that we are completely not in line with this kind of conduct, and we just would like to have an opinion of the panel regarding what this would actually mean if there is any other witness that would arise, then is it the prosecution case has not been closed as of yet, even though we had an indication for that, but whether that would bear any consequence, this type of behavior.
Anything that has to do with the witnesses you will be calling defense counsel for, you will be calling for the defense case that will be discussed at the defense preparation conference. So I would leave it for that moment to discuss eventual consequences. And we are aware, defense counsel, of that was the witness for the defense in an earlier moment, and it still is. So I would not like to say too much on that. I saw so we will defer that to a later moment, this discussion at the defense preparation conference. I saw Mr. Prosecutor standing. Is there something you would like to say on this issue, Mr. Prosecutor?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you very much. Just a few lines of clarification, and maybe I could also be of some assistance when it comes to further proceedings with this witness. So as a matter of clarification, the defense agreed for this witness to be interviewed by the SPO. Before we proceeded with that interview, we had been engaged in discussions with the defense counsel. He said no problem with SPO approaching and interviewing that witness, and we proceeded accordingly as we agreed. Secondly, the SPO conducted that interview with a strict adherence to the law and also the rules of procedure and evidence. We recorded the statement verbatim in audio and video, and we swiftly disclosed its content to the defense and the trial panel for everybody to see what is there. Thirdly, the witness has been included in the SPO list since 30th of July 2021, so several months ago. And on the regular monthly schedules, we provided his name, for example, on the 23rd of November 2021, as our witness proposed for the following sessions. As with any witness before this court, the duty of the witness is to tell the truth, regardless of the party examining that witness. Both parties will have the opportunity to elicit testimony relevant during their respective cases in their examinations. We could also, with regard to procedural aspects, how to deal with this witness in our respective cases, we could also propose a solution, and maybe your honors will take it into consideration. So, as today Mr. Fatmir Humoli is appearing as the SPO witness, we will examine this witness first in the form of the direct examination. Then the defense will have no time limits imposed on this cross-examination. If they wish to take more time, they could. There should be no limit on that. Then the defense will not be only able to elicit evidence relevant to its case, but will have the benefit also of using leading questions. And we as the prosecution will not even oppose those leading questions. Of course, where appropriate, we will be objecting only to the questions that will impede the integrity of proceedings. The defense, of course, might choose to examine the witness separately during the defense case. So we'll have 2 examinations in chief and 2 cross-examinations. However, in this regard, we should bear in mind that it could cause unreasonable waste of witnesses and courts' time and resources. Thank you.
Madam President, sorry to interrupt, and before we proceed, I just would like to inform you that another representative of the SPO has entered the courtroom, and I can, in behalf of you, ask him to introduce himself.
Thank you, Judge Dekkers. Please, I will ask the new member of the SPO to introduce himself, just for the record. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Thank you for reminding me of that. In the heat of the discussion, I simply forgot to mention that at the very beginning of my presentation now. So, as I said before, Mr. Alex Whiting was about to join, and he has indeed joined the session. Deputy Specialist Prosecutor Alex Whiting is with us as of now.
Thank you, Mr. Prosecutor. That has been noted for the record. Mr. Prosecutor, have you finished what you wanted to say?
On this point, Your Honor, I have finished. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prosecutor. Defense Counsel, would you like to make an observation in this regard?
Yes, Your Honor. A couple of observations. First of all, indeed, the prosecutor asked me at that time whether he was, whether he could interview Mr. Humoli. However, as at the time he told me, that would not be really regarding this particular case, but more in general terms about a different topic. Apart from that, we have been reading, obviously, the statements of Mr. Humoli, and that was absolutely not what I had in mind, neither what the prosecutor actually proposed to me at the time. So that is one issue. I take note of the fact what the prosecutor says about time limits and leading questions or non-leading questions. But I do think that this, and this is not the first time that it happens, and even with or without our consent, the prosecution is approaching the witnesses of the defense, and we think that, especially when it comes to just suddenly putting people on the list, dropping a particular witness and replacing that witness with a witness of the defense, that is not the manner that we believe is a just and right cause to go through in this process. So we just wanted to make sure that the court is aware of this. I take note of it. I do not take at this point a position on the fact whether we are unwilling to drop the person from the defense list of witnesses. As you said, Your Honor, that will be discussed at some point when the defense preparation case will be discussed. So for this moment, I leave it to these observations.
Thank you, Defense Counsel. We could, of course, that would have been my next question, discuss the question with regard to yes or no putting this witness on the list of the defense for the defense case, but you already answered that question. You will be able to file your list of witnesses by the deadline that will be given by the panel and insert the name of this witness in or not. We will have submissions from the parties and the Victims' Council at the status conference, and the panel will make its determination under Rule 119 of the rules, taking into account the examination of the witness as it will be done today and on the next hearing. So, and we have noted your observations, Defense Counsel. I did not give the floor to the Victims' Counsel on this. Is there something she would like to remark?
Your Honor, no, we don't have any observation on this issue at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Prosecutor, you would like to have the floor? You have the floor.
Your Honor, thank you. Just one point of clarification. In the discussions with my learned colleague, Mr. Van Bonnet, we never discussed the scope of the SPO examination of the witness. This is not the way how the prosecution operates. We don't discuss the content of our questions and the scope of the examination with the defense before we conduct the examination. The moment we finish it, we disclose the transcript, we give it to the panel and to the opposing party. But we did not, it is not the case that we, as Mr. Van Bonnet claims, discussed the scope of the examination with him before we started that examination.
Thank you, Mr. Prosecutor. Defense Counsel?
Yes, Your Honor, we certainly did.
Defense Counsel, could you please wait till I finish my sentence?
Sure.
Because if not, we get again
Yes.
translation problems. So, thank you, Defense Counsel. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. We certainly did, as I said, and even recently, when the prosecution office requested the defense whether we would consent that they would interview the witnesses of the defense, we simply asked the prosecution's office on what actually would they want to do that. And they refused to give us any particular clarification on that issue. And as far as I'm concerned, there came no clarification on that issue, and therefore we just said, well, if there is no particular clarification on that issue, we do not give our consent. Regardless of that, the prosecution office didn't mind what actually the defense found about that and went their own way, and that is not the way we believe that this process should be conducted, and the behavior of the prosecution, we really dislike this. Thank you very much, Your Honor.
We will proceed now with the witness. Madam Court Officer, can we please usher the witness into the courtroom? Mr. Humoli, good morning and welcome to the specialist chambers.
Mirdita, good morning, thank you.
You can hear me fine?
Yes.
See me on the screen on your left-hand side.
Greetings to you.
Thank you. I am remoting via video link due to the COVID pandemic. I was tested positive. So I am participating in this way. How are you, first of all?
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Humoli, today we will start with your testimony. And you are called to testify before the specialist chambers in the case of the specialist prosecutor versus Mr. Salih Mustafa to assist the panels to reach their verdict. You will have to take your solemn declaration to tell the truth pursuant to Rule 149, paragraph 5 of the rules. You will be asked questions by the lawyers for the prosecution, by the lawyers representing the victims admitted to participate in the proceedings, and by the lawyers, by the defense counsel of Mr. Mustafa, and at the end by the judges of this panel. I would like to provide you with some guidance for answering the questions that you will be asked. So Mr. Humali, please listen carefully to each question. And if you don't understand, feel free to ask for the question to be repeated. We want you to tell the truth and to tell us what you saw, what you heard, what you experienced, and what you sensed. And if you did not see or hear it yourself, please tell us what you saw And would you please tell us how you came to know it. You may not remember all the details, and that is perfectly fine. So do not guess and do not make things up. There's nothing wrong in saying, I don't know, or I don't remember. Is that all clear for you, Mr. Humoli?
Yes, it's clear.
I would like to give you also some practical advice before we proceed, and that is the following. Everything we say here is translated and recorded. So it is important to speak into the microphone. You have two on both sides of you. To speak clearly and to speak at a slow pace to allow the interpreters to interpret everything. And what is also very important is that you should not start speaking when the person asking, that you should only start speaking when the person asking you a question has finished. So when a question is asked, please count up in your head till 5 and only then give an answer. And this pause of 5 seconds will allow us to properly hear, translate, and record what you are saying. And if you have a question, and if you need a break or you need assistance of any kind at any time, please do not hesitate to raise your hand and I will give you the floor. Have you understood all this, Mr. Humoli?
Yes, I have.
Well, thank you. And as I must do with every witness, I will ask you to read your solemn declaration to tell the truth. And I remind you that it is an offense within the jurisdiction of the specialist chambers to give a false testimony. Have you understood that?
Yes.
Court clerk, can you please assist the witness with his solemn declaration to tell the truth? Please, Mr. Humali, read the text provided to you.
Conscious of the significance of my testimony and my legal responsibility, I solemnly declare that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and that I shall not withhold anything which has come to my knowledge.
Thank you, Mr. Humali. Today, the lawyer for the specialist prosecution will be asking you questions. And if there's time, also the victim's counsel. We will not be, the defense lawyer will not be interrogating you today or tomorrow because I cannot be present in person, and he also is going to ask you some questions in private session, and I cannot attend via video link those private sessions. So I'm very sorry to inform you, but that means that on a later moment in time, you will need to come back to do the other part of the examination of you. And we will, of course, take into account as far as possible your availability. But this is a consequence of this COVID pandemic we are going through. Have you understood this?
Yes, I have.
We can now begin with the testimony of Mr. Humali, starting with the questioning by the Specialist Prosecution Office. Mr. Prosecutor, per revision, you have estimated 4 hours for your questioning of this witness. As usual, please inform the court if there are any changes in this regard for reasons of planning. You have the floor, Mr. Prosecutor.
Your Honor, thank you very much. Mr. Humoli, good morning.
Good morning.
Mirë.
Very good.
My name is Cezary Michalczuk, and I'm the counsel who will be examining you today during this session. I'll be asking you questions. If you think that something what I'm asking of is unclear, please tell me to repeat the question, and I will repeat the question according to your wish. Could you please state for the record your name and surname?
Fatmir.
Fatmir Humoli.
During the war in Kosovo, did you have any alias or nom de guerre?
Po.
Yes. I was called Bats.
What is your date and place of birth?
11.
11th of April 65 in Luch e Poshme.
What is your current occupation?
Tani jam
Actually, I am a member of the Kosovo Assembly.
Mr. Humoli, were you ever a member of the Kosovo Liberation Army?
po.
Yes.
What was your position in the Kosovo Liberation Army?
Kur është ndërtuar
When the LAP operation zone was established, I was responsible for the political morale in that area.
You hold that position?
ky pozicion
I held this position since the end of June 1998.
Until when did you hold that position?
afërsisht deri
Approximately until December 1998.
Who appointed you to that position?
në këtë pozicion
I was appointed in that position by the LAB Operation Zone headquarters.
Person in particular who appointed you to that position?
komandoni i zonës
The zone LAB Operation Zone commander Rustem by the nickname of Mustafa, by the nickname of Remy.
Did you hold any other position in the Kosovo Liberation Army?
pas mujt
After December, I was responsible for the civil administration in the LAB Operation Zone, appointed to that position by the General Staff.
Since when and until which moment did you hold that position?
afërsisht nga dhjetori 1999
From December 98 until K4 and ANMIG came to Kosovo, when the chairman of the I was appointed chairman of the Commune of LAB Operational Zone.
Was it June 1999 until you hold your position, that second position in the KLA?
deri në shtator
Until September 99.
And who appointed you to that second position?
në pozicionin e dy
I was appointed in that Rambuya in that position.
You mean by Rame Buja, correct?
po Rambo
Yes, by Rambuya. He was a member of the General Staff.
Could you tell the court what were your responsibilities, first as a commander of politics and morale? in general terms. You don't have to delve into details.
Posizione
My position was that of a superior for political morale, whose duty was to explain people about the political circumstances in Kosovo, the international circumstances, to explain to the soldier the need to organize the Kosovo Liberation Army.
Position, were you also a member of the Operational Zone Command of LAP?
po
Yes, I was member and a soldier of the LAB Operational Zone.
Does it deal with the second position, the Commander for Civil Administration? Also in this capacity, were you also the member of the Operational Zone Command of LAP?
Posiția a dytë
My second position was that of reporting to Rambuya, who was responsible for the civil administration.
So are you saying that you were responsible directly to Rambuya, who was the member of the Kosovo Liberation Army General Staff? Is that what you are saying?
po
Yes.
Speaking about this second position, the Commander for Civil Administration, what responsibilities did you have in this capacity?
ka qenë përgatitja
Preparation for the administration of the country when the cities were liberated, in order to have the administration in place, in order to have every institution have their own responsibilities.
For any particular area or particular cities?
kam qenë
I was responsible for the zone covered by the LAB Operation Zone, comprising Pristina, Podujeva, Fush Kosova, and Obilić town.
Did you have, in your capacity as the Commander for Civil Administration, any powers to nominate certain people in those areas?
në ato zona
Without my permission, nobody could do anything.
You elaborate? Permission, nobody could do anything. What do you mean by that?
jo
I meant that without my consent, nobody could be appointed as commune chairman. That is, every commune chairman was appointed to that position with my approval.
And until when did that situation last? That without your approval, these nominations could not take place?
derisa
Until ANMIC assumed this competence to develop the civil administration.
nuk jam i sigurt
I am not certain, but the ANMIC representative, when they came to Kosovo, he contacted the chairman, commune chairman that we had already appointed, and they continued their efforts to establish the administration in these communes.
As you said, September, because you told us a few minutes ago that you held that position until September 1999. Was it on September when you rested your responsibilities in this area, or was it later than that?
në shtator
In September, the KLA was demobilized. And from that moment on, I was engaged in the political organization of the KLA, which was a political entity that ran for the Assembly of Kosovo.
And what was
It was the Movement for the Liberation of Kosovo, correction.
liberation of Kosovo, correct?
The National Movement for the Liberation of Kosovo.
We will come back to this issue a little bit later, but for the sake of this initial examination, could you tell us since when you were a member of that movement, national movement for the liberation of Kosovo?
From 1993, I was the member of the National Movement for the Liberation of Kosovo, a political military organization that worked to organize and raise awareness of the people to engage in an armed struggle against the Serb occupiers.
Mr. Humoli, we might come to that topic a bit later, and then I will ask you possibly some questions also on that movement and your participation in it. Before I do that, however, I have a set of slightly different questions. Do you know Salih Mustafa?
Salih Mustafa.
I heard about him since the 90s, but I know him directly after 1996.
And how did you meet him in 1996?
After he was released from prison, where he was sentenced by the Serb court, we met in Tirana with him.
Could you tell the court just a little bit about this meeting with Salih Mustafa? What was the meeting about?
Salih Mustafa.
Salih Mustafa was sentenced as a member of National Movement for the Liberation of Kosovo, and after his release from prison, together with Bahri Fazliu, we discussed his readiness to continue the struggle against the Serb occupiers.
And so I understand when you already met Salih Mustafa in 1996, was he already a member of the National Movement of the Liberation for the Liberation of Kosovo already at that time?
After his release, first we discussed his readiness and willingness to continue the war. When he agreed to do that, he continued to be a member of the National Movement for the Liberation of Kosovo.
What was Salih Mustafa's position in the National Movement for the Liberation of Kosovo?
At this period, he was a mere member of this movement.
Later on, but we are talking only about the wartime period, did he become somebody else, not just a mere member, but did he get any other position within this movement?
The structure of this movement was consisted of popular councils. These councils had members that worked to set up organizational trios, and he, Salih Mustafa, undertook to enlarge the ranks of this movement in Pristina and everywhere else in Kosovo.
Did he have any particular assignment in Pristina when it comes to his membership in the movement for the liberation of Kosovo?
His duty was to distribute the magazine Çlirimi, which was published every month by the National Liberation Movement.
Or Kosovo-wide?
In Pristina and everywhere he could, through the people that he knew.
Mr. Humoli, was Salih Mustafa also a member of the Kosovo Liberation Army?
In this period, the National Movement for the Liberation of Kosovo set up its own units, irrespective of the KLA, and these units, after the killing of Zahir Bayazidi, decided that all these units were going to be called the KLA units from then on.
Could you remind us when Zahir Bayazidi was killed?
On the 31st of January 1996.
So, are you saying that from the moment he was killed, and let me go back to your transcript because I need to understand it better. You said that after the killing of Zahir Bayazidi, those units, and I understand units of the National Movement for the Liberation of Kosovo, decided and decided to be members of the KLA. Could you explain that a little bit more?
Because Zahir Bayazidi was very close to the movement, National Movement for the Liberation of Kosovo, we didn't want to set up a parallel unit, let's say, military or political unit, with that of KLA. So the mission of the liberation movement was to rally all the military forces into one organization. That is to set up one unified political front to be more effective in our struggle against the Serb occupiers.
I'm trying to establish the date when this happened, when the units of the National Movement for the Liberation of Kosovo decided to be members or decided to join the structure of the Kosovo Liberation Army.
After the talks we had, the General Staff of the KLA, we agreed on the 11th of May 1998, we drew up an agreement that all the formations of the national movement, the military formations, be led by the General Staff of the KLA. And from this moment onwards, every unit of this movement was part of the structure of the KLA.
I understand that before that agreement of 11th of May 1998 was signed, there were some discussions leading to signing of that agreement. who was involved in those discussions on the part of the Kosovo Liberation Army, and who was involved in those discussions on the part of the National Movement for the Liberation of Kosovo?
In August of '98, together with Rustem Mustafa, we agreed that in the lab operational zone, we coordinate our actions. At the same time, we discussed that Rustem Mustafa showed to the general staff of the KLA that we were willing to join them. As far as I undertook to show to the national movement our willingness to join the KLA. After the massacre in Prekaz of Adem Yashari family, then the conditions were created for us to start to engage in more serious negotiations to become part of the KLA. I had a meeting with Sabit Gashi, Arben Fetoshi as representatives of the students. This meeting took place in Drenica in the General Staff headquarters. The conditions were ripe for signing the agreement for uniting with the KLA. And this conversation took place with Recep Selimi, representative of the KLA.
For this is very clear. However, we have a very small unclarity when it comes to the dates. You said that you decided at some point, you and Rustem Mustafa, you decided to discuss the issue of possible joinder with the KLA. And you said that you started doing that from August 1998. But from the time progression, it seems that it should be August 1997, I think. Because you said earlier that the agreement that was signed on the 11th of May, 1998. So I understand that the discussions in August about an agreement must have been before 11th of May, 1998. So if it was August, those discussions between you and Rustem Mustafa must have been indeed in August 1997. Is my understanding correct?
Yes, that's correct. It was in 1997 that cooperation in the LAP operational zone was between Rustem Mustafa and the National Movement for the Liberation of Kosovo. So we undertook this obligation in order to have our impact for establishing the structure in the General Staff, but also to have an impact on the National Movement for the Liberation of Kosovo. And of course, these talks continued with the preparation of the circumstances so that we could enter into an agreement between the two parties. And these talks and discussions continued throughout the year. We had talks in Tirana. We also had talks in the West, where we knew that there were representatives of the KLA. And the final accord that was entered into on the 11th of May, 1998, was entered into because it was very emergent, in our opinion, to have these joint unions and joint formations following the massacres in Prekaz. So there were thousands of volunteers that were willing to join the military formations, and there were many people that wanted to join the military structures. Therefore, emergently, we needed to make sure that people were joined around the cause and to make sure that all the military formations are geared towards the same aim.
Well, this is all very, very clear. Just one issue for us, for all of us, including the parties and also the court. Could you remind us what was the date of the massacre of the Yashari family in in Prekas?
Well, the battle started on the 5th of March and it lasted up until the 7th of March 1998.
So the agreement between Kosovo Liberation Army and the National Movement for the Liberation of Kosovo was signed, as you said, on the 11th of May 1998. Who are the signatories on the part of the Kosovo Liberation Army and on the part of the National Movement for the Liberation of Kosovo?
Recep Selimi signed the agreement on behalf of the KLA, whereas on behalf of the National Movement for the Liberation of Kosovo, it was Sabit Garshi signing the agreement.
This joinder that we are discussing right now between KLA and the National Movement, did that mean that National Movement for the Liberation of Kosovo in its entirety joined the Kosovo Liberation Army, or only some of its elements? Because you said before, as far as I remember, that National Movement was a, as you call it, political military organization. So my question, I believe, is, did also political part of this organization join the KLA, or was it only the military wing of it?
The KLA units that were established by the National Movement for the Liberation of Kosovo passed under the command of the Kosovo Liberation Army. Whereas when it comes to the membership of the national movement, they continued with the political aspect of their work despite of the general staff of the National Movement for the Liberation of Kosovo, because members of the national movement were also the elderly, and they would not possibly become part of the units of the KLA. And this is why politics happen in parallel to the military engagement and the union of the movement with the KLA. Now, given that the units, the armed units of the movement were transferred to the KLA, it was easier for us to continue with the political wing of the movement.
Very clear. Mr. Humoli, I started asking you questions about Salih Mustafa, and I don't believe I got a clear answer to my question whether Mr. Mustafa was also a member of the KLA. You told me about the merger, but I would like to get from you a clear answer to my question. Was also Salih Mustafa, was he also a member of the Kosovo Liberation Army?
After the merger with the KLA, Salih Mustafa became a member of the Kosovo Liberation Army. So he was a member, he was part of the military units of the national movement. In order to establish the armed units of the KLA, it was myself that was responsible for that upon an order of the joint of the general staff of the KLA.
What was Salih Mustafa's position in the KLA?
Salih Mustafa's position in the KLA was a commander of the Bia guerrilla that operated in the urban area in Pristina, Fushkasova, and Obilic.
We will come back to this issue a little bit later. I'll have a few follow-up questions on this. But before we do that, I would like to draw your attention. Let's switch the topic slightly. I would like to draw your attention to the beginning of the NATO bombing campaign that started on the 24th of March 1999. Do you recall entering Pristina after that date?
After the start of NATO bombing, we entered Pristina at the end of March.
Do you remember the date when you entered Pristina in March? You said at the end of March. Do you remember the date?
At the end of March, probably the 30th of March, or early morning of the 31st of March.
Mr. Humoli, I would like to read, with the permission of the court, a very short passage of Mr. Humoli's statement that he gave to the defense. It's a very short passage, it won't take much time.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would like to read a very short passage of your statement that you gave to the defense, and this is for the record, the defense statement of Fatmir Humoli with number 2, ERN DSM 00119 00133, page 5. And on that statement, when you gave it to the defense, there was the following question from the defense. When did the offensive start? Your answer was, the offensive started in December 1998, but it intensified after the NATO bombings of March 1999. I was part of the groups that entered Pristina, and that was sometime on the 28th of March 1999. Having heard that, can you exclude that you entered Pristina on the 28th of March, as you stated to the defense in the part that I have just read back to you?
I am positive that I've told the lawyer as well that it was the end of March. I don't remember the exact date, but the 24th of December, when the offensive started against La Pustița area, and the 24th of March, when NATO bombing started. I mean, there is a huge difference between the two. You know that I've told you that I entered Pristina at the end of March. And I have also told you what were the reasons for us to enter Pristina. I don't believe there is any ambiguity there. And I think that there is, I've followed the same line in the statement, in my declaration for the defense lawyer and for you as well. So it is about 20 years now from that time, and it is very difficult for me to understand in details when I'm asked these kinds of questions, both from yourselves, but also this has been the type of questions that have been asked by the defense lawyer as well. So these were the types of questions I've been asked, and that's the answer.
I perfectly understand it was 22 years ago, so it's very hard to be precise about the exact dates. So can we say that your entry to Pristina took place at the end of March, but you don't remember the exact date? Is it fair to say that?
So when I say the end of March, it's understandable that it's the end of March because I know where we were on the 1st of April. On the 1st of April, we were informed that the people were going to Macedonia, and in this moment in time, we left Pristina.
We'll come to the dates possibly in a moment, but tell us how you entered Pristina, as you stated today at the end of March, and what you were doing there. What was the reason for that?
The reason for us entering Pristina was that following the information that we were provided with by the Pristina guerrilla, that the army, the Yugoslav army, was distributing information so that the population would flee, would escape from the area and would go in other neighboring countries. So the lab operational zone, when we saw these types of information that were distributed, we were thinking that probably some massacres would happen towards the civil population in Pristina and in the surrounding areas. And this is why the decision was taken that the units would enter Pristina so that we would ban the possibility for the Serb police to have a free hand against the civil population. It was after this moment in time where all the soldiers that knew Pristina entered Pristina, and one of those soldiers was myself. I was there together with Salih Mustafa. I entered Pristina together with him.
It was you, Salih Mustafa. Do you remember anybody else?
Salih Mustafa.
Salih Mustafa. Salih Mustafa knew the soldiers of the guerrilla. That was not our task, as a matter of fact. And again, with Eyüp Macedonsi, we entered Pristina. So he was a superior in Sharban, and he was together with some soldiers of his.
As I understand, to protect local population against a possible massacre, as you put it. How long did you spend in Pristina?
In Pristina, we were for about 2 days. We remained there for 2 days. We entered towards the end of the 30th, and so we stood there all day long, and we left there on the 1st of April. So we left early in the morning, in dawn.
So, just to be clear, according to your statement of today, you left Pristina on the 1st of April, early in the morning, at dawn. Is that what you said?
Yes, early dawn.
That you spent in Pristina about 2 days. Is that correct, what you have said? I'm talking about your today's statement.
Approximately.
I'd like to read back to the witness a very short portion of his SPO statement that regards the length of his stay in Pristina.
Please proceed, Mr. Prosecutor.
So, for the record, this is SPO statement with the number 100954-TR-ET, part 2, page 30, line from 16 to 25. The question of the prosecutor about exactly that day of yours in Pristina was, did you stay there overnight? Your answer was, I stayed there during the day, and then at night we moved to reach Sharban and La Paștița. And the question of the prosecutor was, so just to clarify the issue, so you on one day You entered Pristina, you stayed there for the whole day, that day, the same day, and then at night you left Pristina and you went to Sharban and to La Paștița. Is that correct? And your answer was, yes, it is correct. And then you continue, we needed to go and to give the information to lab operational zone about the events that happened in Pristina. So from this short passage, it seems that you were in Pristina only one day.
So if we're considering the hours, it is more than 24 hours. If we entered in the night on the 30th, we left Pristina on early morning on the 1st of April. So this is what the situation is. And so in this moment in time, I was not aware that I had to accurately report about the time, and it's not that we have taken any record of the time that we've spent there.
I understand the situation was not ripe for taking any written records. I understand that perfectly. But today you told us on at least two occasions that it was a long time ago, it was at the end of March. And now you are saying that it was on the 1st of April, and you are not that you are now sure that on the 1st of April in the morning you left Pristina. So how can you be sure about the date if it happened 22 years ago? And in the context of, you said before, that it was at the end of March when you entered Pristina.
In my declaration, I have also said that it's the end of March, the start of April, and the beginning of April is the 1st of April.
But my only question in this regard, you told us before today that you are not sure about the dates of your entry. Are you similarly not sure about the day when you left Pristina?
I am not safe because I know when the citizens of my country went to Macedonia, and I know that the soldiers told us that they have passed to Macedonia. So there were some individual maltreatments, and we judged that the risk for a mass massacre was overpassed in that moment in time. So this is the reason why the 1st of April is a day that I can remember better.
We might come to the dates again in a moment, but tell us, today you stated that, as you said, on the 1st of April in the morning, you left Pristina. Where did you go from Pristina, from there?
From Pristina, we went to Sharban, from Sharban to Rimaniști, from Rimaniști to Ranidol, from Ranidol to Verbos, and from there we went in the neighborhood of Lonivce in Barileva.
So you said that we left Pristina. Who left Pristina together with you?
I was together with Salih, Mustafa, and the members, the soldiers of the unit that served in Sharban.
So you yourself went exactly where, to which point? Do I understand correctly your destination point was La Paștița?
We went to Charbon, we rested there for a couple of hours, and from there we went to the neighborhood of Lumnezve. From the neighborhood of Lumnezve, I went to the lab operational zone headquarters in Lapashtis.
Did Salih Mustafa go with you all the way to La Pashtica, or did he part ways with you at some point?
We departed together with Salih Mustafa to leave for La Pashtica. But en route, while we were discussing, because we had similar things to discuss, Salih Mustafa stopped in the neighborhood of Lumnezve, and then I continued further on.
We got the interpretation about this place as Lumnezva. Was it rather Lumnice? Could you say that again for the record?
The neighborhood of Lumnizva.
You said the neighborhood of Lumnizve. What town or village was Lumnizve part of?
That is a neighborhood of the village of Barilev. And Barilev itself is composed of many neighborhoods.
So you told us that you parted ways with Salih Mustafa in Lumnizve, neighborhood of Barilev. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
What is the distance in terms of kilometers between Pristina and Barileve?
It's about 10 kilometers in the paved street.
Madam Court Officer, I would kindly ask you to pull up, or Mr. Court Officer, I would like to kindly ask you to pull up a map of the Pristina area, Kosovo, which is under the following ERN number, SPOE 0023 8094 to 0023 8094. It's a one-pager. It's a map. If we could...
Mr. Prosecutor, can I remind you that we are approaching 12:30? So please bear that in mind with your line of question to see when it's a good moment to stop.
Your Honor, I'm going to just show the witness a certain map, ask him to take a look at it. I will ask a question or two, and then we could perhaps go for a break.
Thank you, Mr. Prosecutor.
Mr. Humoli, can you see in front of you the map?
Yes, I can.
Possibility to make markings on the screen, and if possible, could you, for us, mark Pristina? Maybe you could put a circle around Pristina for us to understand better your route from Pristina to La Pashtica.
So if we're talking about the itinerary that we follow from Pristina to La Pashtic, I'm not talking about the asphalted way that is 10 kilometers, but that was twice the amount of kilometers, and that had to go through a mountainous area.
We will cover this a bit later. Could you please, for now, for us, make a circle around Pristina? Just for everybody to understand what we are talking about geographically.
Just to make it sure, I will ask the presiding judge if she can see the map. Can you confirm that to me?
Yes, I have the disponibility via legal workflow to all the material the SPO is using, and I've called it up myself.
Okay, thank you.
I can see that we have
Yes,
technical-
sorry to interrupt you. The
course.
marking might be the issue, but we can show the marking also after the break.
We can also do that, of course, Your Honor.
Yes, maybe that would be the best thing to do.
I absolutely agree.
Yes, thank you. And sorry for the interruption again.
Okay, if this is the case, Your Honors, I don't have for now questions. We will resume after the break with some questions. Hopefully, we'll be able to make markings on the map. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Prosecutor. Mr. Humoli, we will now have a break for 1.5 hours till 2 o'clock, and then we will proceed from 2 to 4. Madame Court Usher, could you assist the witness in exiting the room, please? Thank you. We will break and we will resume in 1.5 hours. The hearing is adjourned.
All rise. All rise.
Welcome back. I will call appearances. Mr. Prosecutor, could you confirm that in which composition you are now?
Your Honor, we are in the same composition as before the break.
Thank you very much. Victims' Counsel?
Yes, same for us. We have the same composition than this morning, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. Defense Counsel?
We have no changes, Your Honor.
Thank you. Before I call the witness in, and before we resume with the direct examination for witness 4849 by the SPO, the panel wants to address the scheduling arrangements for the remainder of the testimony. And the panel wishes to put to the parties and the Victims' Counsel 2 options. And then I will give an oral order depending on the submissions received. The first option with regard to the scheduling would be to complete the direct examination and the questioning by the Victims' Counsel and then the Defense Counsel. Then the Defense Counsel would proceed with his cross-examination entirely in public session. So we would have the SPO finish, then the Victims' Counsel, and then the Defense Counsel would start with its cross-examination. And if requested, we will go then through redirect and rejoinder as well. And that would be all done in public session. And this would take place between today and the 3rd of February as initially scheduled. And then the defense would be granted its request, if any, to recall Mr. Humoli as a defense witness during its case, at which stage the defense can pose all questions they consider appropriate, also in private session. And the second option would be to complete the direct examination and the question by Victims' Counsel, and then the defense would be granted its request, if any, to recall Mr. Humoli as the defense witness during its case, at which stage the defense can pose all questions they consider appropriate in private session. And both options take into consideration the calendar of deadlines already established by the panel in its second decision on the conduct of proceedings, which should remain unchanged unless absolutely necessary. And these 2 options proposed by the panel to the parties and the Victims' Counsel is also based on avoiding recalling calling this witness 3 times, because if we would be calling him, he has been called today, we would be recalling him maybe next week, like we discussed this morning, and then also maybe during the defense case. So this proposal tries to avoid that situation. Well, I leave the floor to the parties and Victims' Counsel to seek their views on the above options. Mr. Prosecutor, you have the floor as first.
Your Honor, we would go, if we can have a vote, we would vote for option number 1, namely for the prosecution to elicit as much as we can today and possibly tomorrow, and then we'll continue as much as we can with this witness as he's present here in the public session, and then with the defense cross-examining the witness instead of calling the witness again in option 2. So our preference in sum is for option 1.
Thank you, Mr. Prosecutor. Very well. The Victims' Counsel, you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Honours. Equally for us, it seems that option 1 would be a good option which strikes the right balance between the needs of the different parties and would allow proceedings to continue as normal as possible in these circumstances. So option 1.
Thank you. Victims Counsel. Defense Counsel, you have the floor.
May I consult for a moment, Your Honor?
Of course. Please proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. We understand that in option 1, we would continue on the 3rd of February, and we would still, if we request for Mr. Humoli as a witness for the defense, that we can do such a request again, and that would be granted. Do I understand that well?
Defense Counsel, if under option 1,
Yes.
what we would do is we would continue like we would always do.
Mm-hmm.
So the normal proceedings, you would be doing your cross-examination,
Yes.
you would do the redirect and the rejoinder, and the judges would do their questions.
Yes.
But you would be already granted your request, if any. I
Yes,
mean, because
of course,
formally
yeah.
it still has to be done, of course.
Yes.
Because we will have the defense preparation conference.
Right.
You would already be told now
Yeah.
that the panel, because we want to give the accused a fair hearing, and if there are questions to be put by you, to this witness, which cannot be put now to this witness. They must be put at a certain moment.
Right.
And that would be, in that case, during the defense case. We don't want you not to be able to put those questions to the witness, because that is in the right of the accused.
Right.
No doubt about that.
Yes.
So yes, if you would put him on the witness list,
Yes.
yes, the panel would be
Willing
would
to.
grant the request. To,
Could the speakers kindly not overlap during interpretation? Thank you.
I understood. I understood. So in that case, Your Honor, option 1 is that we continue on the 3rd of February.
Now we will continue today,
Yes.
tomorrow. Today is Thursday. Today is Tuesday.
Right.
We have tomorrow and we have Thursday.
Right.
Those 3 days were scheduled
Yes.
to do the hearing of the testing of this witness, and we would proceed like we would have done also under normal circumstances if I would have been present in the courtroom.
Yes.
So we would do it now.
I understand. It is just that we would like to have an opportunity, Your Honor, to consult with our client, and that would be preferably tomorrow morning before the case starts, so that we have at least an idea and able to see what we can do in cross-examination. So as long as we have a possibility to consult with our client regarding it, then I think we could go with option 1, and I hope there would be any time available to consult.
As I see the planning for today, Defense Counsel, is that the SPO, we have still 2 hours,
Yes.
that the SPO will continue with its examination in chief of this witness.
Yes.
And then the Victims Counsel. I will verify with the SPO, but I think that less or more there will be a natural moment of a break.
Yes.
That we could finish. So that
Yes.
will be between 3:30 and 4 o'clock.
Yes.
And then you will have the time after that to consult with your client.
Yeah.
And if there is still a remainder
Yes.
of questions by,
SPO.
would it be the SPO or the Victims Counsel, that we were not that far, you will still have this afternoon to consult with your client on the questions of cross-examination.
Yes.
But that has nothing to, I would say that has nothing to do with
No.
the proposal that lays on the table,
I understand.
that we want to postpone, because that's it's all about. We want to postpone the questions in private session to the defense case. That is our question now.
Yes. Yes.
And there, and on that, I would like an answer of
Yes.
you. And if I understood it right, you are saying, but please correct me if I'm wrong, we could go along with option 1, but please, I would like to consult with my client regarding the cross-examination. But that would not have been different if we would have done the questions in a private session also today, if I would have been present. That's another request.
That is correct, Your Honor. It is all just assuming that the SPO finishes today its examination. Is that correct?
You could still, this afternoon, consult with your client regarding the cross-examination from the part of today. And tomorrow, if you would need some extra more time, because there are still a lot of questions by the SPO, you could also always have some time to speak with your client within a reasonable manner. But we have not been doing it differently, isn't it, up till now?
Okay, then I think that I think we can go along with option 1 then. So we will have then a court session tomorrow as well, and the Thursday.
We will see for Thursday.
Of course. Yeah, well,
let us see how we
of course.
proceed. Thank you for your views. Before I give my oral order, Mr. Prosecutor, is it for you already possible to say something about the time you think you will be meeting this afternoon?
Your Honor, we started quite late today, and our examination was scheduled to last for 4 hours. And I believe we have exactly the questions that would require answers for, and with questions and answers, will fill this time slot of 4 hours, maybe even slightly more. In a nutshell, we will not finish today. It's likely we will finish at some point tomorrow, but I cannot give you any indications with regard to that before we finish this day, and we will see how fast we will progress.
Thank you, Mr. Prosecutor. I noted that we will proceed, and we take it as it comes. Very well. Thank you. I will now render an oral order in order to preserve the fair and expeditious conduct of the proceedings, and to avoid calling Mr. O'Malley as a witness as many as 3 times. The panel hereby decides to complete the direct examination and the question by Victims' Counsel, and orders the Defense Counsel to proceed with this cross-examination afterwards entirely in public session. If requested, we will go through redirect and rejoinder as well, also in public session between today and the 3rd of February of 2022. The defense would then be granted its request, if any, to recall Mr. O'Malley as a defense witness during its case, at which stage the defense can pose all questions they consider appropriate in private session. And this concludes the oral order. Okay, very well. Now we can continue with the direct examination of witness 4849 by the SPO. Madame Court Usher, can we please bring the witness into the courtroom? Thank you. Welcome back, Mr. O'Malley.
Mr. Jacob,
Thank you.
How are you?
Mirsham.
Very good.
To hear. Mr. O'Malley, before we continue with the direct examination by the specialist prosecutors of prosecutor, I want to inform you of a decision of the panel that we have decided to proceed with the examination by not only the Specialist Prosecution Office, but also the Victims' Counsel and also the Defense Counsel. Early this morning, I told you that it was different, but today, tomorrow, and maybe the day after, that is a reserve day, we will be, they will be examining you and also the judges. And then at a later stage of this procedure, if the defense decides to call you as a witness too, you will be called again as a witness, and then also questions can be put to you in private session, and in that case the panel will be hopefully complete again all together in the courtroom. Have you understood that?
Yes, I am available for the court.
Then I will give the floor to Mr. Prosecutor. Please proceed with your examination in chief.
Thank you, Your Honor, and good afternoon, Mr. Khumoli. I believe in front of you, you might have a map of the Pristina region. Is that so?
Yes.
We were discussing a departure of yourself and Mr. Salih Mustafa from Pristina, and you told us that you continued to the village called Barileve. Is that correct?
Yes.
Us on this map that you have in front of you, Pristina, by putting a circle around it. Could you now put a similar circle around this village of Barileve?
It must be here, but the letters are very small.
Because on the version of the map that I have in my folder, this place is pretty visible. So maybe you could just make this map just a bit bigger.
Mr. Specialist Prosecutor, if I was to do that, the markings are going to change, so you might want to ask the witness to do that again, please.
Yes, so maybe we could do that again. What we aim for is the precision in marking. And a bit bigger, if you may. Oh, this is going to be a bit tricky because later on my request would be to mark also another location. So could we simply zoom in for a second for the witness just to see the location where it is, then slowly zoom out, and if he's able to see it also the map in a smaller scale, that would be brilliant. Okay, Mr. Witness, can you see this village that we discussed, Barileve?
Yes.
Zoom out. Would you still be able to see it and mark it for us? Could we zoom out a little bit just to see the entirety of the map? Thank you very much. So could we now do it on this scale? So first, please put a circle around Pristina. Then put a circle around Barileve. Could you also put a circle around La Paštice?
La Paštice should be somewhere here.
Okay, I understand. I could see that there is a place close to it, but it's close to it. Maybe it's around the same place. Okay, thank you very much. So, just to clarify, for the record, that when you left Pristina, and Salih Mustafa, as you said, was together with you, you went to Barileve, and then you continued to La Pastice, but Salih Mustafa did not continue with you. Is that the case?
Po.
Yes.
Do you know where Salih Mustafa went when he had parted ways with you?
Nuk e di ku ka shku.
I don't know where he went. But I know that he stopped at Lobnica neighborhood to rest, and then I continued.
Tell us, Mr. Humoli, how much time did you stay together with Salih Mustafa in Barileve?
Nuk jam i sigurt.
I'm not sure, but I don't think we stayed for a long time, because while walking we kept talking and then we parted ways. He stopped there where I said, and I continued further on. I can't give you an answer how long we stayed together in the Lumnitz neighborhood. But until we were assured by the Lumnitz unit that we could continue our way towards La Pastitz.
Do you remember what was at least the part of the day when you parted ways with Salih Mustafa in Barileve?
Kjo duhet jetë
In the afternoon, I believe.
sakt, nuk e di.
I can't give you an exact hour.
From your previous answer, I understand that you were walking from Pristina to Barileve together with Salih Mustafa. Is that so?
Po.
Yes.
Okay, I would like to mark this map for identification.
Very well.
So you said that that trip to Barileve was on foot. Do you know if Salih Mustafa, during the year 1999, during the war time, if Salih Mustafa sometimes traveled in that area by car?
Po kam vështirë me udhëtu me mak.
It was difficult to travel by car because you had to pass through the road that was controlled by the Serb forces. So we were obliged to make that section of the road by foot because it would be dangerous to use the car.
That way from Pristina to Barileve was covered by yourself and Mr. Mustafa on foot. I understand that. My question is of a more general nature. Do you know whether Mr. Mustafa, during the wartime, I'm talking, let's focus on 1999, whether he was using a car?
Kam përdorur unë mak.
I used a car, Salih used a car. But after the NATO strikes began, events developed rather differently because the Serb forces' movements were unpredictable. So they were obliged to run away from the NATO strikes, and we couldn't move about with cars as we used to do before the NATO airstrikes. A detail that I should say is that NATO struck Also KLA trucks, because it couldn't identify whether they belonged to the KLA or the SERB forces. So under such circumstances, the KLA had to be very careful in its movements by cars.
You said KLA had to be careful, but you are not saying that KLA was not using cars. They were not moving by cars.
It used cars as need was, but when its positions were near the road or near places where fighting was taking place, it could not use the cars. Only in the peripheric area where it was much farther from the fighting positions it did.
Yes. Mr. Humoli, you told us today before the break that at some point you were nominated for the position of the commander for civil administration, and you told us today that it was in December 1999. Is that so?
It should be so. I don't exactly know the date, but it should be the end of 1998.
I would like to talk actually about the dates, and I would like to seek the permission of Your Honors to read a very brief statement, part of the statement of Mr. Humoli that he gave to the SPO.
Please proceed.
So I would like to make reference to the SPO statement of Mr. Fatmir Humoli, ERN number 100954-TR-ET, part 1, red, page 9, lines from 22 to 24. And listen what you said, what is in the record at least, in relation to the time when you were nominated for that position. The question of the prosecutor, line 22. And then how about the second position, commander for civil administration? And your answer was, in autumn of the same year, 1998, that means after October. So you said today it should be sometime in December 1998, where you were nominated to that position. To the SPO, you said it was autumn after October. So can we say that you're not indeed sure about those days?
In Kosovo, in the 22nd of December, we launched the start of the winter season. And so up until the 22nd of December, it's autumn. And I can't tell you in details what the date was back then.
You also told us today that from your appointment to the position of the commander for civil administration, so that second position within the KLA, you were engaged in developing civil administration structures. Is that correct?
Yes.
Locations within which you were developing those structures. You mentioned Pristina, for example, you mentioned Podujevo. Did that development of those structures required a lot of organizational effort on your part?
Everything needed its own time. In this phase, because of the dynamic developments of the process, we received the mandate to set up the administration. Therefore, we studied the possibilities on who would be the proper persons to activate in the communes once they were liberated by the Kosovo Liberation Army. So everything was prepared in advance so that in the moment in time when the commune was liberated, we would automatically appoint the people responsible for establishing the relevant administration in the communes.
From the moment of liberation, you mean June 1999, correct?
Our preparations were that whenever this happened, whenever the towns were liberated, we would be ready to appoint the person that would be responsible to set up the communal administration in the relevant town or place that was liberated.
Focus on the first months of your activities as the commander for civil administration. So you were appointed, let's say, December 1998, but let's focus on the first part of 1999. That development of civilian administration or civil administration, did that require considerable amount of travels from you, visiting those places, villages, towns in the region?
Travels were needed, but because of the conditions imposed by the constant offensives, we tried to make sure that our travels were limited, because we already had some civil protection that was organized at the level of the LAP operational zone. Therefore, we had the possibility to get orientated through the administration that was allocated to the civil protection. And everything went in parallel to the public administration that was organized by the general staff and the civil defense that was organized by the LAP operational zone. However, in this point in time, there was no clear rules. There were no clear rules on how the organization was going to happen. And this is the reason why we were waiting and we were drafting the rules on the way for us to proceed.
But from what you told us before, as a person who was the commander for civil administration, you were developing the local civilian administrative structures. Was that so?
I was appointed to develop them, and in this point in time, we were waiting for the draft rules of the general staff so that we could continue with tangible work.
Were your activities involving meeting people within the LAP operational zone territory?
Yes, I've met with people, so they've come and see me. So there was this person that was named the mayor of the commune of Pristina. He came to the LAP operational zone. Nasser Grachevsky as well came, so he was elected the mayor of the commune of Ushkosova. So the talks we were holding were on how to proceed further afield.
Understand. I have maybe the last question. Were you engaged in the development of any brigades in the LAP operational zone in 1999?
We were in a war situation, and at any place there was a battle, I was staying there, and I have been part of that relevant event.
The question was more precise, namely, were you involved in the organization or creation of any brigades within the LAP operational zone?
I have dealt with the organization of the LAP operational zone, and I have been involved as well in the organization of every unit of the zone. So I've given my contribution in the context of the national movement for the liberation of Kosovo, and no brigade has been set up without the contribution of this movement. Therefore, I was involved in the establishment of the brigades as well.
Wasn't a brigade established in 1999 within the LAP operational zone?
është kriju brigada 105.
Brigade 153 was established in 1999, whereas in 1998 there were two brigades established, namely 152 and 151. Whereas the guerrilla, the BIA guerrilla, was operational from the illegality time, and it continued its work throughout. So these were the four formations at the beginning of 1999 under the responsibility of the LAP operational zone.
One last question about Brigade 153 that you mentioned. What was your involvement in the creation of this brigade in 1999?
I was engaged because Adem Shehu was a superior from the Republic of Albania, and he was in charge of training the units for the national movement for the liberation of Kosovo in the barracks in Tirana. And therefore, I proposed to the LAP operational zone for him to be elected as the commander of Brigade 153.
Physically traveling to establish that brigade,
we have moved frequently. And once the brigade was established, I believe that I received the authorization by the command of the operational zone. And I'm not very sure about the moment when this unit and this command became legal. I'm not sure on whether I was there or not at that moment in time.
Understand. Speaking about dates, in your statement to the defense, and we discussed this statement earlier on today, you were not sure about any particular day, indicating that you entered Pristina sometime on the 28th of March 1999. Let me read you part of your statement dealing with the dates of that time, part of the SPO statement. And I would like to read to the witness, with the permission of Your Honor, part of the SPO statement, which is on the following ERN number, 100954-TR-ET, part 2, page 28, line 912.
Do you want to have Madam Court Officer pull it up?
So,
Mr. Prosecutor? Sorry, is this going to be pulled up?
it could be pulled up, yes. Yes.
I would have a preference to pull it up.
Yes, so
Please.
let's do so. So the question of the prosecutor to you about that time in Pristina, and especially the entry, was as follows. And then you said that you entered Pristina together. So what could be the date of that entry? Your answer was the dates could be either the 31st of March or the 1st of April. I'm not sure about them. Do you remember saying that to the prosecutor?
The The only thing that I remember is that I'm not 100% certain about the dates, but I remember that it was the beginning of April or the end of March. The reason for that is that bombing started on the 24th of March, and it kept on for many days, up until the Serbian military forces took the decision to make the population flee away from that area. So I cannot tell you of exact dates today, and that is what I told you back then as well. What I can say is that it's the end of March, and if we take into account the fact that this is a process that lasts for a couple of days, I mean, this is how you come up with those dates, and I don't know how to otherwise explain you the length of the days.
Komoli, just to sum up what you have just said, so you are not exact, you cannot be exact about the dates. The entry to Pristina could be on the 28th of April because this is the end of March. It could be 29th of April. Maybe it could be the 30th of April, maybe 31st of April.
In this moment in time, and when you asked me, and when I told you that it was the end of March, the beginning of April, well, at least at that moment, I did not remember that March has 31 days. And logic tells you that considering that March has 31 days, then you can make the correlation otherwise. But I've told you that this was at the end of March and the beginning of April, and that's the only logic. There is no second logic to that. So I am sure, like I've told you, that on the 1st of April, the first column passed through Pristina to Macedonia, and we were informed by the activists that were in Macedonia about this, and there were also soldiers of the guerrilla, and there was no possibility, just to go for 1 kilometer and not have a guerrilla soldier along with the population.
I'm trying to understand better how precisely you remember this date. You said that the first column of people moved towards Macedonia, as I understand. But first of all, and I have read in detail on the statement that you gave to the defense, and also I reminded myself about our own statement taken from you. And you never mentioned this issue of any unit, any group of people moving to Macedonia as a time post around which you orientate yourself around the dates. You are telling this only now. So can you tell us why didn't you say that to the defense in your statement? Why didn't you say that to the prosecution in your statement?
The reason for that is that neither the prosecutor or the defense asked for explanations that are detailed, as you are asking me right now.
You told us today, in the answers to several of my questions, that you cannot be sure. It could be the end of March, but you are not certain about the dates. And I understand that also at that time, giving your statement to the defense or the prosecution, you were not sure about the dates, but you could also at that time give us this, so to speak, time post saying, well, I remember it because on that day there was a certain group of people that moved to Macedonia. Why didn't you tell it to us at that time, if you were still at that time also not sure about the dates?
Your Honor, if I may, I believe that the witness has just answered.
Defense counsel, could you please wait till I give you the floor? You may proceed, defense counsel.
Your Honor, I believe that the witness just answered that particular question. So to repeat the same question does not make the answer any different, in my view.
Mr. Prosecutor,
Your Honor,
you can proceed to try to elicit from the witness an answer, but bear in mind that we are going around the same subject now. And I see your point, so please proceed. But we are coming at a moment that I think that that there may be some repetitiveness in answers.
Your Honors, I understand that. The issue, however, is of a great importance for the case. We all know that the question of dates is a very relevant one. So with your permission, just very briefly, I'll try to continue and then I'll move to another topic. It's a question of understanding how well the witness could understand the dates after 22 years have passed since all those occurrences, all those events. This is relevant in relation to the substance of this case, Your Honor.
Mr. Prosecutor, the reason that I'm allowing you to continue with this line of questioning is exactly for this reason, that I see that it is very relevant for the case. I just wanted to give you a reminder that I was also seeing the point of the defense, but please proceed.
Mr. Humoli, how do you know that the column you mentioned passed on the 1st of April and not, say, on the 30th of March, 29th of March, 31st of March? How do you know that?
We were informed by the brother Salih Mustafa. He was accompanying the column.
Understand that
Salih Mustafa's brother was a soldier of the guerrilla as well, and he was part of the soldiers to have different positions amidst the population. So it was the wave of the population that led them to that direction, and this is why we were notified of this occurrence. So we were notified of this, and then we went ahead going towards La Pastizza.
it's true. Your answer implies, your answer is about how you were informed about that movement and who informed you about it. My question was about how do you know that? How do you know that this was that particular date?
It was on the 1st of April that we went towards La Pastizza, whereas one day before that they went to Macedonia.
No, but again, this is very relevant because you are explaining to us what happened, how the development was taking place. My question was, how can you remember that precise date? Is there any time post that you could refer to? For example, you told us before that on the 24th of March there was a NATO bombing, very memorable event indeed. I agree. From that moment, however, from the 24th of March until the 1st of April, there are plenty of days. And from what you told us, there were plenty of things happening. For example, you mentioned that in your understanding, the Serbian forces were about to possibly organize a massacre in Pristina, and you went there. There were so many events within these dates. My question again, and because we have to be precise about it, how can you be sure that it was the 1st of April when you left Pristina and not any other day? Maybe 28th of March, 29th, 30th, 31st.
Given that I recall that we went to La Pastizza in April, there is no way that we're talking about a different date.
But again, I understand that you went to La Pastizza and you told the court already that you did. At some point you parted ways with Salih Mustafa in Barileva. It's not the question of where did you go. It's the question of when was it and why can you be precise about that date? What is the time post in relation to which you can orientate yourself when it comes to that precise date? 24th of March, as I said, and possibly you agree with me, it was several days before. Many things could have happened in the meantime, and many things. I mean, tell us about, again, why are you so sure it was the
Och
first?
det du sa, jo, jag kom från att här
I've told you that it was on the 1st of April. I've told the defense it was on the 1st of April. And of course, I've based myself on the information that we've received. But back then, you didn't ask us on how we received that information.
Your Honor, I would like to quote another short part of the statement of the witness
Please proceed.
about the time when he was going from Pristina with Salih Mustafa. Today, he told us, and also he said the same in his statement to the SPO, that he continued with Salih Mustafa to Barileve, then they parted ways, and he himself continued towards La Pashtica. So this is the statement of the SPO and his testimony of today. However, I would like to refer you, Mr. Witness, to your statement you gave to the defense about that trip from Pristina. And this is the defense statement of Fatmir Humoli, number 2, DSM 00119 to 00133, page 5. And this is what you said to the defense, the question from the defense. And did you travel together to La Pashtica, together impliedly with Salih Mustafa? And your answer was, yes, me and Salih Mustafa went to La Pashtice. Ayub stayed in Sharban. Salih, he returned immediately to Sharban. From there, I don't know, he received his task from the command and continued further. So from this statement you gave to the defense, it seems that you went with Salih Mustafa all the way to La Pashtica. Today you told us he didn't go with you. So what is exactly what happened? What you told us today and to the SPO, or what you told to the defense counsel in relation to where Salih Mustafa went with you?
Kjo është e vërteta që po
This is the truth, what I'm telling you. We departed together, and this is what I told the defense as well, but I don't know how they have recorded that down. But the truth was that we departed together, we were planning to go there together. But then we took the decision, because we saw the events in Pristina, and we decided for myself to report to the headquarters of the zone, whereas Salih stopped to get back to Sharban. On how he got back to Sharban, that I don't know. I was accompanied by the Lumni unit to La Pashtic, and this is what happened. This is the truth.
Would you agree with me that there is a discrepancy between your statement to the defense, Salih went with me to La Pashtica, and your testimony of today, that Salih did not go with you to La Pashtica, but you parted ways in Barileva? Do you see that discrepancy?
në thelb nuk ka mos përputhje.
In essence, there is no discrepancy, but there is a discrepancy in the approach. The court has already given me this statement for me to read it, and I'm talking here with reference to the statement I've given to the defense. The statements that I've read, it's clear that somebody that knew Albanian took the statements directly from myself, whereas when it comes to the statement I've given to the prosecution office, it's understandable from the wording. It was translated from English, so they have taken as a basis the English version and they have translated that into Albanian, and sometimes there are discrepancies. But what is true is what I told you right now.
trying to make to you is that if we've got so much discrepancies when it comes to big geographical distances, different locations that you gave regarding this encounter, how can you be sure about the date if you don't even remember precisely where geographically you traveled together with Salih Mustafa? That is my question.
Salih Mustafa
We went together with Salih Mustafa many times. And when the lawyer asked me, I wasn't sure. That was my position then. When the prosecution asked me, it was much later. And at that time, I had time to think it over before giving your answer. That's why my answers are more detailed to you than those to the lawyer. This discrepancy is due to the dynamics of events, but shouldn't be regarded as something exceptional. We didn't dare keep a diary. If we did, I would have been more accurate about when narrating everything that happened. I would have written down the history of my activity if I did keep a diary. So we have to understand what happened, but not in terms of exact dates. Like I'm today here, I came here on the 30th and the session is taking place on the 1st. These are things that, you know, are not so easy to understand. I remember when I left home, it was the 30th, and now the session starts on the 1st. I don't think it is something that can be understood, what you're trying to understand.
Do you accept that that your account has changed with regard to the dates and to the places? Because we've got different accounts when it comes to dates and places. Today, that stem from your today's testimony, from your statement to the SPO, and from the statement that you gave to the defense. Do you accept that?
Your Honor.
Defense counsel, I will first want
Date you think are unclear.
Witness, could you, Mr. Humoli, could you please take off your headset, please? Defense counsel, you have the floor.
Yes, Your Honor. I do not believe that that the witness has to accept anything from the prosecution. So the line of question of do you accept this or do you accept that, I think it's just that the witness has his testimony, that's what he says, and the acceptance of something is a conclusion by the SPO. It is not something that the witness is saying.
Defense counsel, I don't think that it's problematic to use the wording, do you accept, in this phrase. So Mr. Prosecutor can continue. He wants to try to understand why there are certain discrepancies in the testimony, apparent discrepancies according to the SPO in his statements. And he's asking the witness to explain that. Mr. Prosecutor, please proceed.
Yes. Your Honor, I'll try to be brief. Mr. Humoli, this is a very relevant thing because it seems to me that your memory has changed across those statements. Quite different account was given to the defense, as we have discussed today. Quite different account was given to the SPO, and we also discussed that today. Today you are telling us an account which also slightly differs from either the prosecution SPO statement or the defense statement. So would you agree with me that your memory has been changing when it comes to those dates at the end of March, as you said?
I don't agree with you. I have been very accurate end of March, beginning of April, and I don't think the dates are at stake here. Why should we go into that?
Kumoli, could you tell me whether you met Salih Mustafa at any point in January 1999?
I met him every week, I think.
Precise dates of those encounters with Salih Mustafa in January 1999.
I cannot give you an accurate date, but our meetings were weekly, on a weekly basis. The dates for us were all the same. We didn't have any weekend or any time off because of the war.
Could you tell us, speaking about January, where those meetings were taking place between you and Mr. Salih Mustafa?
Most of the meetings took place in Sharban, Rimanisht, sometimes in La Pastitz, depending on the needs and circumstances.
So you're talking about the meetings between yourself and Salih Mustafa in January 1999, correct?
Yes. This was the case every month. Such meetings with Salih Mustafa and our superiors were held wherever we went. Wherever I went, I met the commanders of the brigades or the relevant units. When I was in Gulag, I met Brigade 153 commander. When I was in La Pastitsa, it was 151, 152. When I went to Chichavitz, I met those of Brigade 142 in the Shal operational zone.
About February 1999, could you give us precise date or dates of any meeting with Salih Mustafa?
I wished I was able to provide you accurate dates.
Mr. Humoli, during the war, I'm talking about 1998, also 1999, did you have any personal strategy preparing yourself for your potential capture by the Serbian forces?
It was very less likely that we would be captured by the Serb forces. But if it was a matter of arresting us, I was prepared how to talk to them. Just as I declared to you that if pressure was exerted on me, I would have refused to talk to you as well.
It's true that you said that. Your Honor, with your permission, I'm going to read to the witness probably one last excerpt from his SPO statement regarding the dates.
Please proceed.
I'm referring to SPO statement number 100954 TR-ET, part 2, page 24, line 25, and page 25, line 15. So on page 24, it's going to be the last line. on the following page, 25, is going to be lines from 1 to 5. This is what you said to the prosecutor, Mr. Humoli. And again, bear in mind my question about your personal strategy, preparing yourself for potential capture. You said the following thing, line 25. And you should know that during that period of time, I prepared myself to forget the events. The question of the prosecutor was why? And you said, because I would go around and the danger would be that of being arrested by the Serbian forces. And that was the way we would prepare ourselves, not to tell anything to the Serbian forces. Did you say that to the prosecutor, Mr. Humoli?
Yes, it's correct. But to my recollection, this is a Kosovo court, not a Serbian court. And there is a difference if you allude to something different. I know that the Assembly of Kosovo has approved the establishment of this court. That's why we are open to cooperate. That's why I came here to help this court not make mistakes regarding these events. And I'm very sure that for you it's very hard to understand how things developed on the ground.
You're right, Mr. Humoli, I cannot even imagine. That's why you are a witness to tell us about those developments. So, do you confirm that indeed, as stated to the SPO, you had that strategy to forget events and you were preparing yourself to forget events? Is that correct?
It's correct. It happened to me that I moved by having my ID card, not to endanger the citizens, because the police might always arrest us. But when we were armed and moved about, it was not likely that the police could arrest us. From Plava, for example, to the bus, I used to travel with my ID card, a fake ID card. But I always was in danger of being identified by face and not by the ID card.
Mr. Humoli, so let's move on. Did you see Salih Mustafa again during the war, after that first encounter in Pristina?
Of course, I did.
Tell us when it was and where it was.
I'm not certain about the meetings. I met him in Sharban when the Serb offenses aimed to drive the population away from Gulag. And then I met him when the wounded left from Sludge to the rear of the enemy in Kolich.
Because of this case, let's focus on that encounter in Zlash that you have just mentioned. Could you tell the court and all of us when that encounter with Salih Mustafa take place in Zlash?
I wouldn't dare provide you with an exact date, but 1 day or 1.5 days before the ending of the Serb offensive in Slash. When we transported the wounded and people without weapons from Slash to Kolich. And it was Salih, Mustafa, and Seydi Veseli that organized that movement. And I was part of that, helping them. Present there were the deputy commander of the brigade, Salih, Mustafa Rahman Dini, who was member of the brigade staff.
You said you cannot give us a precise dates. However, I would like to get those dates from you. Try to travel back in time. You told us already about certain dates. We discussed this Pristina encounter with Salih Mustafa. So I'm trying to ask you with more precision. Could you give us roughly the dates of your encounter in Salih Mustafa in Slash, with Salih Mustafa in Slash?
I can't give you the date, but I can say that we met every maximum 10 days. Regarding the mission to remove the wounded from Slash, because of the Serb offensive which ended about on 19th or 20th of April, this may be 2 or 3 days after when I myself stayed in Slash.
Serbian, let me just get back to the transcript. So you said the Serb offensive ended on the 19th, on the 20th, and 2 or 3 days after you were in Slash. Is that correct? Or could you clarify it again for us? Because I don't think the record is super clear.
Was it 2 or 3 days after the offensive ended, I was in Slash.
So you were in Slash at that time. How did you meet Salih Mustafa? What was he doing when you saw him at that time in Slash?
I met those of Brigade 153, but I don't know what Salih Mustafa did. I do know, however, that the staff of Brigade 153 decided to remove the unarmed people and the wounded from the war zone and the overwhelming majority of the soldiers, and to transform that area into a fighting area divided in small groups to inflict damages to the Serbian army.
When you came to Slash at that time, where did you come from? Where had you been before you came to Slash?
Rimanisht Sharban. In that part where fighting was taking place in order to protect the civilian population. The duty of most of the superiors was to be as close as possible to the soldiers. If the superiors are close to the battle, they are more motivated to fight. The resistance grew. Therefore, there were less victims, civilian casualties, compared to other operation zones.
Were you in those locations that you mentioned between the beginning of April and the time you went to Slash after that Serb offensive?
The LAP Operation Zone Command, when I was there, it was the beginning of April. I can't say for how long I stayed, but after 1 week or 10 days, fighting broke out in Sharban, Rimanishte, which was the fighting line. And this was the period when I passed from Rimanishte and Sharban. So it is some 10 days or half of April.
You told us that you met Salih Mustafa, because my question was about meeting Salih Mustafa in Zlash at that time that you mentioned after the offensive. So when you saw Salih Mustafa, what was he doing? Because you said you met him, so I understand that there was an interaction between the two of you. So again, my question, what was he doing when you met him?
I don't know what he was doing, but the decision made to remove the wounded, I'm sure that Salih Mustafa was part of it in the brigade staff. I can't tell you more than that. If the brigade decided that Salih Mustafa, Salih Veseli, Rahmandini, and myself to accompany these people, that is the wounded and the unarmed people from this area, then he was part of that strategy to remove the wounded.
Did Salih Mustafa actually participate in the moving of the wounded from Zlash? Did you see him doing that? Removing people, participating in any way in the removal of the wounded people from Zlash?
He was personally involved, Salih Mustafa, because he had a friend of his who was wounded, and I remember that he went to the wounded.
So you saw him attending the wounded, being with the wounded people?
Yes, we were together. He saw me, I saw him. We engaged in the same movements to transport the injured to the rear part of the enemy lines.
How did you transport the wounded from Zlash?
From Zlash to a neighborhood of Ketchakol. And we waited until dawn to continue to remove them when there were no Serb forces, to take them to Kolich, where offensive had already taken place and the Serb forces had withdrawn from there.
So you told us before that you saw Salih Mustafa in Pristina, and we discussed that issue at length before, and that you left with him at some point, the end of March, beginning of April. And the next time you saw him was when he was tending the wounded after the offensive. Is that the case? Is that correct?
I'm telling you that I've seen him at other times too, but this is more focused because of the duty we had to transport the wounded. But logically speaking, I told you, our superiors, we met very often. So, because as I explained, the lab operational zone command had to be very active and near the troops. I can't tell you exactly when, because the meetings were something normal and very common. It was not something extraordinary like the case is now with me being here in this court and looking at the judges.
And speaking of Zlash, the location of Zlash, from which place in Zlash were the wounded taken to college, as you said, by yourself and Salih Mustafa and the others who were participating in that evacuation?
Slush has about some 20 houses. At the center was a school, and it had the houses were around the school. The wounded were in a base in the periphery of Slush, above the school, because of the height, and it was a position which was more easily to defend. It was far from the roads, and the Serb forces couldn't penetrate there easily.
Was that place from which you took the wounded to the school that you have just mentioned, in terms of kilometers, the distance, not kilometers. Tell us more or less the distance.
I'm not very certain now. I don't know.
Just one last question about...
Your Honor, if I may.
Mr. Humoli, could you please take off your headphones, please? Defense Counsel, please proceed.
Yes. I'm not sure, but counsel is saying that what is it here?
Yes, I think I can see what my learned colleague is saying,
Yeah,
because there is a question probably misquoted.
Yes.
The question in the transcript, it's on the page 77. The question is line 23. How far was that place from which you took the wounded to the school that you have just mentioned in terms of kilometers? So,
Exactly.
so maybe I should clarify. I'm not suggesting that.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting in any way that the witness said that the wounded were in the school. My question was about the distance. School, the place.
That's how I understood it too.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify. My question was about the place from which the wounded were evacuated in relation to the school and the distance between the two places. That was my question. I think the witness has already answered that question, but we could clarify it if necessary, if this was the issue.
And that is indeed the issue. I thought it seems in the transcript as if the wounded would be in the school, but they, well, maybe you can have some clarification on that issue.
Madam President, I saw and heard that the accused was reacting loudly in the courtroom. And maybe you could not notice it back home, but I think it's good to make an official note of that here in the courtroom.
Yes, no, I did not hear it. And Mr. Mustafa, you're not supposed to take the floor when you are not given the floor. And I won't, I warn you, and this is an official warning. And there is another question I have for the witness. Does the witness understand English? Do you understand English, Mr. Humoli?
Maybe you have to repeat the question, Madam President.
Do you understand the English language, Mr. Humoli?
No, I don't. I only know that you are speaking English.
Thank you. Mr. Prosecutor, I was under the impression that the witness answered to your question, I don't know, that he had understood it well, but to have it rightly on record, I would say repeat the question and then he can answer it and then we have no discussion about it. Thank you, Mr. Defense Counsel, for raising it.
Of course, Your Honor, I'll repeat the question. My question was, just for the sake of clarification, what was the distance between the school in Slash and the place from which you evacuated the wounded people?
I do not know the exact distance. I know that that place was more elevated as compared to the school.
One question about the timelines again, and I apologize, I'm coming back to the issue of the timelines on and on, but it is relevant, I believe, in the context of this case. From the moment you parted ways with Mr. Salih Mustafa, we discussed this issue of Pristina encounter, and later on when you parted ways in Barileve, to the moment you met him in Slash on the occasion of the evacuation of the wounded, where were you meeting Mr. Mustafa? In which occasions? Was it, I don't know, the front line? Was it at some meetings during which you were exchanging information? What was it? What were those occasions?
They were routine meetings, but they were not planned meetings. So like I said, we would meet maximum every 10 days because the battles were such that we had to be close to the soldiers. And of course, Salih Mustafa had to be as close as possible to the information that was provided from the enemy side. Now, about the time when we met, I can't provide you details about the meetings because those were routine meetings, and that's all I can say.
But about locations of those meetings with Salih Mustafa, in between these two time posts that I mentioned, can you tell us any places, villages, locations where you were meeting Mr. Mustafa within that time frame that I indicated in my previous questions?
So given that they were routine meetings, I don't know exactly where we met. It's not that I've ever thought about that. But the idea was for us to meet frequently because we were covering more or less the same terrain. So the battle that was held was from Batlave, Rimanivt, Lupch, to make the civil population, the civilians, to leave their homes, and we had to take care of the left side of the road Pristin-Levskovs and the right-hand side of Pristin-Orlavch. So that was the strategy of the army.
Let's move on to a slightly different topic, however it is related, at least when it comes to the location. Did any members of your family stay in Slash in 1999?
In 1998, it was my father and my brother, whereas in 1999, it was my wife and my two children.
That they stayed in Slash in 1999.
In April of 1999, they left Zlash one day before the offensive started. So they left from Zlash and went to Pristina.
Could you tell me the dates within which your family members, your wife and children, were in fact in Zlash in April, as you said, 1999?
They remained there 3 or 4 days before the offensive in Zlash started, because they also remained in Rimaniș and Șerban, and because of the offensives there as well, they passed to the area of Zlash. They were in Zlash for about 3 or 4 days in one of the houses above the school.
Around at that time, more or less, you also came to Zlash. So, as you said, your family stayed there for 3-4 days. How many days before or after they came to Zlash, you also went there?
I went to Zlash, to the brigade command, to the brigade headquarters every week. It was not something precise because the training and the fighting were related in the part of Șerban and Rimaniș with the Brigade 153 headquarters, because they belonged to Brigade 153. I was part of Șerban, but it happened that I would move from Șerban to the brigade as well.
What I'm trying to establish is whether you were also in Zlash during the time when your family was also there. That is my question.
I was there when my family was in Zlash because I sold them off. So they left to Pristina and I sold them off while doing so, whereas my father, he sold them off up until in vicinity of Pristina.
So you saw your family off, but my question is, within this period of time, 3-4 days of your family's stay in Zlash, how long were you in Zlash? Were you at that time with them 1 day when they were there, 2 days, 3, or the whole stay of theirs?
3-4 days up until the operation for the evacuation of the injured, I was in Zlash. It was this period in time when my family left Zlash, as well as the injured were evacuated from there. A good majority of the family members that were there, because there was no house in Zlash that was not occupied by civilian population, but a good majority of those people left for Pristina, and part of the group were as well members of my family. There was no house in the Golak region that would not invite civilian population, because the population of Golak area became 10 times more back then. Because before there were many people that left to Pristina and Podujeva area, but in that moment in time, those houses would take many other civilians. So, in other words, every single house in the area was full of women and children.
Speaking about the time, I want to clarify maybe one last thing. So, there was an offensive approaching, Serbian offensive, around that time, correct? How long before the offensive reached Zlash had your family left Zlash for Pristina?
1 day. one day before the offensive started, in the right-hand side of the road Pristina-Levskotsk. One day before that. One day before the offensive started, because the Serbian offensive went through the villages of the commune of Podujeva, and the population fled away from the Gulag area, and they started to enter in Pristina through the columns, and that was the moment in time when my family went there as well.
You told us that your family left Zlash around roughly one day before the offensive started. So could you tell us?
Yes.
That the offensive, Serbian offensive, started?
The offensive started from the 18th, from what I recall, in the Slash area. So it was present on the 19th or 20th, and it lasted for about one day. I don't exactly know the date, but the offensive there was all-inclusive. So they entered into the area from all directions, and the Zlash area, from Zlash to Mramor, that area was surrounded by the Serbian forces, and it was bombed and shelled all the time. And this is the reason why the civilian population had to escape from there. In general, the Serbian forces, the Serbian military forces, were not able to have battlefields and fightings into certain areas. But however, while the battlefield continued from Podujeva to Leskos, they continued into that route. But the logics of the Serbian military forces, because they didn't have the logics to fight the soldiers of the KLA, so they were bombing the place so that they made sure that no one was left in the area.
I understand. You told us that your family left one day, roughly one day before the offensive, and then you told us that it could be around 18th of April when it started. So can we assume that they left on the 17th of April, or you cannot say that with certainty? I'm talking about the precise date when your family left.
We can assume as we wish, but I don't know.
Mr. Humoli, where did your family stay in Zlash at that time? Could we discuss a little bit the location where they stayed?
I told you that they were located in one of the houses above the school of Zlash. There were tens of families sheltered there, like my family.
How far was that location where your family were staying in Zlash from the school that you mentioned before, in terms of kilometers, or if it's less than a kilometer, meters, more or less?
It's several times that I'm telling you that I can't tell you the distance. I don't know the distance.
Mr. Prosecutor.
Yes, Your Honor.
I think I heard that question already before in different wording. So,
I think my question, Your Honor, before was about the distance between the school and the place from where the wounded were evacuated. And now my question is the distance between the school and the place where the family of the witness was staying. I think my question is right.
No, you're right. You're right.
I apologize if I'm asking the same question again, but
no, you don't have to apologize.
For the
I
clarity,
see what you're saying.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you. Mr. Humoli, are you aware of the existence of any military hospital in Zlash?
In these two facilities that my family was staying, there was this facility, which was the hospital, and it was from there that we took the injured and we evacuated them towards Salih. So there were those facilities which were occupied by civilian population, including my wife and my children, and there was this other facility where the injured were located.
Speaking about the wounded, and in the context of the stay of your family in Slash, did the wounded come after your family had left for Pristina, or when your family was still there in Slash?
Yes, sokação familiar na to.
For as long as my family was there, the injured were there too, because there were developments in the area of Vitis and Marefts, where the battles left our soldiers injured, and they left towards a village, which we call Viti of Marefts, which is beneath the village of Slash. So that part left, and those that were injured were evacuated to the outskirts, to the suburbs.
Mr. Humoli, I would like to, of course, with the permission of the panel, I would like to read to you part of your SPO statement exactly about this issue.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm referring to the SPO transcript, ERN number 100954, TR-ET, it's part 3, page 7, and it starts from line 23 and continues until line 25. And then it finishes on page 8, line 1. I apologize, Your Honors. I need to just give a little bit, I need to give a corrected page numbers. So it will be the same page, page 8, but lines would be 23 to 25, and then line 8 and 13. Sorry, just from 8 to 13, yes. From 8 to 13. The question of the prosecutor exactly about this issue was as follows. Okay, sorry, did the wounded people end up there after your family had left, or at the same time when the family of yours was still there? Could you tell us what happened in kind of time sequence? And your answer was, after my family left, because the fighting started after the departure of the families. So, what are you saying today after having heard this part of the statement? When the wounded were there in that location, was your family indeed still there, or had they left before the wounded were placed in that location, in that place?
What I know is that one person, the Utra Hadri, that was a doctor, she got to know my wife that was in Slash. Now, about the dynamics of the developments and the pressure associated to them, that is not of importance to me. That's not of relevance to me. I don't know whether that's the case or not with the prosecutor. However, what I can say is that my family left the place before the offensive, and the injured could not leave the place earlier. So a little bit before the offensive was over, we evacuated the injured. Now we are only talking about the slash area being taken by the Serbian forces, but the battles had started many days before that, and the injured were not only injured that day, but they were injured even before that, as was the case of Viti, of Marea, or Sharban, where people were injured as well. I have no comment, and I don't know how to explain that, but what I know for a fact is that Teuda Hadri, that was the only doctor there, so has been in contact with my wife even after the war. So she has been the doctor of my wife after the war as well, but we have known her during the war.
Was there any moment when your family was staying in Slash that you were staying with them? My question stems from the fact that you told us that there were several developments. I understand you were very busy preparing for the incoming offensive. So my question again is, when your family was still there, did you stay with them for a certain amount of time?
Quando é que visitou a família?
I have visited my family.
When you were visiting them, do you remember in which place they were staying?
There was this house amongst the other houses where people lived.
By a certain room of that house or the whole house? Do you remember that?
In the times of war, there was no luxury as such as to have a house all by yourself. So there were many civilians and there were too many people staying at the same home. So the children and women would stay inside the house, whereas the men would stay outside.
You told us that your family at that time consisted of your wife and 2 children who were staying there in Slash. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Were they staying, your wife and your children, were they staying in one particular room of that house that you told us about?
The children and women, they would sleep inside. But when it comes to meeting them, I would have met them in the yard. I don't know the details on how I met them, but I have met with my children there, and that's the most important thing.
That you were not really staying with them over that time when they were in Slash, but you were just visiting them. Is that correct? Is that my understanding correct?
It's a short period of time. The developments were very dynamic. So I visited them. I don't remember how long I remained with them.
When you were visiting your family in that place that you mentioned, was it in front of that building? When were you meeting them? You said, I was meeting them in the yard.
Can you repeat the question once again, please?
If I'm unclear, I apologize for that. When you were visiting them, you said that those encounters with your wife, with your children, were taking place not inside of that building and in the yard. Is my understanding of your answer correct?
Yes.
Did you, when you were there, how long did that encounter with them last? Oh, encounters when you were there. So you go to that place, you meet your family members in the yard, and roughly, how long did that encounter or encounters with them take place?
I'm not sure. But what is important is that we have discussed about the situation, and I have told her that they need to go to Pristina.
I understand you cannot tell us with great precision how long those encounters were taking place, but are we talking about minutes of that discussion? So you're coming, talking to them a few minutes, informing them about developments and going back to your obligations and duties? Or was it longer than that? Could you tell us a little bit more about those encounters?
It's not an issue of minutes, it's an issue of hours. But I can't tell you how long that was. I haven't kept any record of that. So I know that I've met them, I've met my parents as well, and that's it.
Correctly that you were meeting them in the yard in front of some building or buildings, and you were talking for hours with them in front of the building in the yard? Is my understanding correct?
Yes, yes.
Mr. Humoli, when you were visiting them, talking to them, did you have any chance to visit any buildings in that location? Apart from talking to them, you're standing in the yard, and the chance to visit other locations there within that yard?
The hospital was there as well. There were the injured there as well. I met with the injured as well as with my family members. So there was this building where the hospital for the rehabilitation of the injured soldiers was located, and it was from there that we evacuated them to other areas.
With your permission, I would like to read to the witness a very short part of the SPO statement.
Mr. Prosecutor, you may. At the same time, I would like to remind you of the time we are now. So I suggest you finish your line of questioning for today, if that's possible, and then we resume tomorrow.
Your Honor, this is exactly what I intended to also suggest. I don't have any. I don't have too many questions on that particular issue, so a few minutes from now, and we should wrap up for today.
Very well. Please continue.
Mr. Humoli, I would like to read to you a part of the SPO statement, and for the record, it is the following ERN number: 100954 TR ET, part 3, page 7, lines 15 to 19. And listen to this exchange between the prosecutor and yourself, Mr. Humoli. Question: when you were staying with your family in that compound, were you visiting other buildings within that compound, or were you staying only in the building where your family was? And you said, no, I didn't. No, I didn't need to go around. I needed to stay with my family because I had not seen them for several months. So from this exchange, Mr. Humoli, it seems that you didn't actually go around, but you were focused on your family, as you said, because you hadn't seen them for several months. So is that correct, what you said to the prosecutor?
It is correct. It is true that the rooms where the civilian population was staying, those rooms I didn't visit, I didn't see. So, and this is the context in which I gave the statement to you. We didn't discuss about the injured during that time. The injured were covered before some days of the finale of the Serbian offensive towards Salih. So my family was staying there for about 3 to 4 days. So this is just one piece of the development of the event for 3 or 4 days. So whereas when it comes to the injured, I did see them, because when it comes to the other rooms, when the civilian population was residing, I mean, it was not correct on my end to go and see them or to visit them.
Just to understand it a little bit better, and this probably would be the last area I need to have more precision, if possible, from you, Mr. Humoli. So, when your family was there, and you were visiting them, talking to them, is my understanding correct that you were not going to any places within that compound, but when they left and there were wounded people piling up there, you indeed visited the wounded? Is my understanding correct?
Питањето до јот.
The question is not clear to me.
Raise it. So, is my understanding of your statement correct that when your family was still in Slash and you were visiting them to see them, discuss issues with them, advising them to go to Pristina, you were not visiting other places within that compound? However, when they left and wounded people started piling up in that location, you indeed visited the wounded people. Is my understanding of your statement correct?
Ја nuk е куптуват драјт.
You haven't understood it right. I said that I didn't visit the places, the rooms where other civilians stayed, and that the wounded came and stayed there for 3-4 days because of the battles that were fought earlier. So I, of course, visited the wounded there. The wounded were there for the time that my family was there. The reason that my family left one day before the offensive, and the decision to remove the wounded was taken 3-4 days before the offensive. That is the order of events. I don't know how to explain it better, what happened.
You have just said is that in the statement that to the SPO that I quoted and I put to you, you said clearly that when you were visiting your family, you were not going around, you were not going to other buildings, and you were focused on your family because you had not seen them for months. And now you are saying that you indeed visited one place, namely the place where the wounded were kept. So I'm asking about this discrepancy. Could you explain this discrepancy? Why did you say that to the SPO, that you did not indeed walk around and you did not indeed enter any other places?
I already told you I didn't visit the other places where other families were being accommodated. I said that I visited the wounded too. But I can't give you minute details like times, and maybe it's difficult for you to understand without being there when events unfurl. We who have experienced such events find it difficult to recall them, let alone yourself to understand by listening to me or others, listening to different variants. So you have to bear in mind the time, and as to minutes or seconds, I can't tell you. Even though now we are talking now, I can recount the event, but the details, in my opinion, are not just to ask me about at this time. Because I believe I can't. I am not able to tell you. If I could, I would have told you. Because I came here voluntarily to assist this court. And you have to understand me. There has never been any tendency to change my statement given to you or to the lawyer, defense lawyer, because I'm certain that no regular army in the world could have waged a more just war than our army did.
It is very true that we were not there, and this is exactly the reason why you are asking all the questions, because you were there. That's why we try to get as many details as possible and to get the clearest answers from you as possible. And thank you very much for today's testimony. Your Honors, this would conclude my line of questioning for today. I will continue tomorrow with some other topics.
Thank you, Mr. Prosecutor. It is indeed now after 4 and therefore the end of the day in court. We will continue with the questioning of Mr. Humoli, witness 4849, tomorrow at 9:30. Mr. Humoli, thank you very much for your time today. Let me remind you that you should not discuss your testimony with anybody this evening.
Sorry, sorry to interrupt you once again, Madam President, because the witness already left the courtroom, but he will come back in a minute. I will let you know.
What happened? Okay.
We don't know, but... So, yes, he will have a seat now. So this will be the best moment to proceed.
Mr. Humoli, you already left, I understood. I still had some things to say to you. We will resume tomorrow at 9:30, and I want to remind you that you should not discuss your testimony with anybody. Have you understood that?
Er komt shortcut.
It is clear to me. But I believe my testimony is public.
It's not to be discussed at this moment in time. And you will be escorted by somebody of the registrar, and I hope you get some rest this evening. It has been a long day, and we will see you again tomorrow morning at 9:30. Thank you for today.
Thank you.
Madame Court Usher, could you please escort the witness out of the courtroom? Thank you, Madame Court Usher. Mr. Prosecutor, is there still something you would like to raise at this moment in time?
Not at this point, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Victim counsel, is there something you would like to submit to the court?
No, thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, very well, thank you. Defense counsel, do you have anything to raise?
Yes, Your Honor, briefly. Only that I would like to make some arrangements with Mr. Mustafa in order that he can be called and that we can have contact with him. So therefore it would be useful if he stays a few more minutes together with somebody of the registry so that we can properly conduct a time and the way of communication.
Very well. I will leave that for CMU to arrange, and tomorrow when we continue with the SPO direct examination, you will be granted a longer break in order to discuss, in addition to what has been done in direct examination today, to discuss it with your client tomorrow. Yeah. Okay. Very well. Then I thank the parties and the Victims' Council for their attendance, and I thank the interpreters and the stenographer and the audiovisual booth and security for their assistance today. The hearing is adjourned till tomorrow, 9:30.
All rise.